Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning. It's Tuesday, the 3rd of February. I'm Caroline Hepker in London.
And I'm Stephen Carroll in Brussels. Coming up today, the $1.25 trillion moonshot marriage. Elon Musk combines SpaceX and XAI in a bet on the future of artificial intelligence.
The UK government warns the EU's Made in Europe push could cost British firms billions.
Plus, Nigel Farage has long struggled in pro-EU Scotland, but his populist Reform UK party is gaining traction. We have a special report.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
Elon Musk has announced that he's combining SpaceX and XAI in a deal that values the enlarged entity at $1.25 trillion. In a statement on SpaceX's website signed by Musk, the rocket firm said it acquired XAI to form the, quote, most ambitious vertically integrated innovation engine on and off Earth. The deal brings together two of the largest closely held companies in the world. Bloomberg's M&A correspondent Ryan Gould says it's possible Musk could also be eyeing a tie-up with Tesla in the future.
Elon's view is that we're going to have data centers in space, and part of this is about putting compute and the idea of space exploration and sort of exploration of the universe together. This is clearly part of his vision. There is a very good quote that kind of encapsulates a lot of this, which is what he wrote, I think, late last year, which is that in some ways his three companies, Tesla, SpaceX, and XAI, are going to come together. They're going to convert, and maybe this is kind of the first leg of the stool that we're now seeing.
It's Bloomberg's Ryan Gould. The combined SpaceX firm is still expected to go public later this year as the world's richest man looks to increasingly costly bets on artificial intelligence and space exploration.
President Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi have agreed a surprise deal to slash US tariffs on India. American levies on Indian goods are being cut from 25% down to 18%, while an additional 25% punitive duty tied to purchases of Russian oil is being scrapped. Writing on social media, President Trump said India had agreed to buy $500 billion of US goods and halt crude purchases from Russia as part of the deal. Speaking to Bloomberg, India's Chief Economic Advisor Ananta Nageswaran hailed the boost to Indian markets and the economy.
This was something that was one big stumbling block to sentiment in the capital market and also for the Indian rupee, as you pointed out. So I'm not surprised that the reaction is very positive in both these markets. And at the end of the day, it is the world's biggest consumption market, $21 trillion of GDP. And therefore, to be able to have access to it is important.
That was India's Chief Economic Advisor Ananta Nageswaran. At 18%, India's tariff is now lower than most Southeast Asian countries.
Precious metals are recovering some of their losses today after plunging from record highs over the past few days. Spot gold climbed as much as 4.2% after falling by close to 5% yesterday. Silver rising as much as 8.1%, erasing the previous day's loss before pairing those gains. Bloomberg's Brendan Fagan says it appears the worst of the sell-off is over.
The constructive thing is holding those key moving averages. It may suggest that systematic traders are stepping in to start nibbling after quite the washout we had. But like I said, you never really want to catch a falling knife here. So there could be more to come, but it seems like the worst is behind us, and where we held is relatively constructive.
Bloomberg's Brendan Fagan was speaking after investors had been piling into gold and silver over recent weeks, driven by renewed concerns about geopolitical upheaval, currency debasement, and threats to the Federal Reserve's independence.
The UK's Metropolitan Police says that it's reviewing reports that Peter Mandelson committed misconduct in public office following the latest release of Epstein files. Documents appear to show that the former UK ambassador to the US leaked sensitive government information to the convicted sex offender while serving as a minister in Gordon Brown's Labour government. With more, here's Bloomberg's Chris Pitt.
The file suggests Mandelson emailed Epstein about the European Union's rescue facility for struggling member states, telling him the deal should be announced tonight. The emails are dated May 9th, 2010. The following day, European policymakers announced a €500 billion loan plan, which prompted the euro's biggest rally in 2 years. The documents also show that in 2009, Mandelson forwarded internal Downing Street emails about tax policy proposals to Epstein. Mandelson has not responded to the latest allegations. However, in an interview with The Times carried out last week but published on Monday, he referred to a, quote, handful of misguided historical emails which he deeply regrets sending. In London, Chris Pitt, Bloomberg Radio.
The latest revelations from the Epstein files come as a lawyer for Bill and Hillary Clinton said they will now appear before a congressional committee investigating the disgraced financier. A full vote in the US House of Representatives had been planned this week to hold the former president and former Secretary of State in criminal contempt if they continue to defy subpoenas in their inquiry. Bill Clinton has previously stated that he parted ways with Epstein many years before his death and he has no knowledge of his crimes.
France's parliament has adopted a budget for 2026 after the Prime Minister survived 2 no-confidence votes. The new legislation has smaller spending cuts and tax increases than earlier proposals, meaning that the deficit for the year will be larger than initially planned. But the concessions mean that Prime Minister Sebastien Lecornu has avoided the fate of his predecessors, who were both forced to resign by the National Assembly in disagreements over austerity measures. The French budget adoption is expected to bring more political calm as opposition parties shift their focus to municipal elections in March and then the French presidential vote in 2027.
The British government is becoming concerned that a protectionist push being discussed by the European Union could exclude British companies. The UK is lobbying the EU against restricting market access and encouraging cooperation. Bloomberg's Tiwa Adebayo has the story.
Made in Europe, an initiative designed to transform the EU's manufacturing sector, but one that could be costing British firms billions of pounds. The Prime Minister and his government are stepping in over fears possible industrial policy changes could damage firms with sites in both Britain and Europe. Bloomberg understands car makers Stellantis, BMW and Volkswagen could all be affected. It's thought the fresh concerns have driven Keir Starmer's recent bid to take the UK closer to the EU's single market. The fears are likely to have been at the top of the agenda when the European Commission's trade and economy chiefs visited London yesterday for meetings. In London, Tiwa Adebayo, Bloomberg Radio.
And those are a few of our top stories for you this morning. Right, let's get to the markets right now. So after a volatile 3 days in gold markets, we actually see spot bullion prices up this morning by 3.5%. India's Sensex, after the trade agreement between Modi and Trump, up 3% this morning, and Barney Group seeing some relief. South Korean stocks also hitting a record high on Tuesday. Samsung Electronics having the biggest gain, as much as 11%, the biggest gain since 2009. RBA down in Australia, the central bank there raised interest rates. So some disparate stories to think about, but really important as we look at stock futures for Europe, which are reasonably positive, up about 0.3%, and we have a softer dollar, US dollar, on the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, weak at about 0.2%. Stephen.
Well, in a moment, more on Elon Musk's deal to merge SpaceX and XAI, plus why Nigel Farage's Reform UK party is hoping for a breakthrough in Scotland's upcoming parliamentary elections. But in the story that caught our eye this morning, on the rise of the martini. Good morning. If you're just listening to us as you've gotten out of bed and you're already thinking about drinks, Kat O'Dell has been writing for Bloomberg Pursuits about how martinis are appearing on more menus than ever. Not just New York, it's a London phenomenon too. Hawksmoor has its own martini bar in one of its London locations as well. And this is even though people are drinking less overall. The restaurateurs that Kat spoke to said that it's when people are drinking, they want to, quote, make it count and have something that's particularly good. So she's been looking at some of the, the twists that these restaurants are offering. Ginger and jalapeno, chili brine and coriander, a splash of sherry, yogurt,
it's
parsley.
Definitely too early for that. Yeah, no, it's too early for that in the morning, I think. And slightly weird additions. I suppose that maybe they're quite easy to make. The martinis is the point, and quick to serve, and they've probably got a sizable markup. But yeah, I don't think I fancy brine martini.
It could work. I'm a martini fan, and I had my favourite spots in London, so I'm still on serving. I have a very good friend coming to visit who loves a martini, so I'll be checking out some of the Brussels options in the coming days as well. But you can read Kat O'Dell's piece at Bloomberg.com, and we'll put a link to it in our podcast show notes.
Now, let's bring you more on what's happening on the markets then today, with equities regaining their footing after yesterday's sell-off. Gold and silver prices are recovering too. And we've had the big news of that merger in the AI space, Elon Musk's SpaceX and XAI combining. Our Markets Live managing editor Christina Aquino joins us now in the London radio studio. Nice to see you.
Thank you for having me, Caroline.
So let's start on the deals. New SpaceX acquiring XAI. These two companies in the Musk universe. What is the significance of this deal? It is huge numbers.
Yeah, absolutely, Caroline. I mean, I suppose because you pointed out that it is all in the Musk universe, it is perhaps quite symbolic more than anything. But I think this really just speaks to this idea that if you're involved in anything AI at the moment, then investors will be paying attention. And, you know, especially with a figure this much, $1.25 trillion, right? I mean, this probably has a lot of implications for Elon Musk specifically because, you know, he's already the world's richest person at the moment. And so kind of this opportunity to consolidate resources and perhaps get more of a solid footing into the AI space could be beneficial for him. And certainly investors are likely to take that as a positive, at least at first blush.
Yeah, if you're interested about where SpaceX and XAI could be working together, we have an episode of the Here's Why podcast looking at data centres in space. That's available for download now. But Christine, let's turn to the broader moves that we're seeing on markets. Recovery in precious metals today, and Asian equities rallying too. It looks like we're coming back from that cliff we were plunging over yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely, Stephen. I mean, January was really just such a challenging time for risk sentiment and risk assets generally. And, you know, coupled with the rally that we've seen in metals, where we sort of saw this phenomenon where gold and silver, usually seen as a haven asset, suddenly acting more like risk assets, just because the speculative trade there has gotten really, really hot. And so, yeah, we saw kind of toward the end of January a bit of an upheaval in that space, rippling across the rest of the markets complex, but a little bit of normalization now, especially also as markets have had some time to digest now things like the Kevin Warsh nomination for the Fed chair, and what could that mean moving forward for the rates path in the U.S. and beyond.
We've also been talking about President Trump slashing tariffs on India. What has the market reaction to that been?
I mean, obviously a positive, again, at first glance, especially because the U.S.-India relationship has not been without their issues over the past year. And that's something, of course, that both countries, particularly India, was probably keen on getting settled sooner rather than later. And so the fact that there seems to be an initial accord here, definitely a positive. We're certainly seeing that in the Indian stock market today. Of course, as always with these trade deals, the devil will be in the details in terms of the time frame for the actual implementation, what that's going to look like. As we know from the UK's own experience, trade deals actually take years to negotiate and settle. And so even though we do have some initial pronouncements from both President Donald Trump as well as India's Prime Minister Modi on social media, there's a few more steps between there and an actual trade deal.
Okay, Christine, thanks so much for joining us. Christine Aquino, our Markets Live managing editor. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this.
We are building up to the May elections here across the UK, including in Scotland, the parliamentary elections in May, which are shaping up to be the first major test of Nigel Farage's ability to sort of translate his popularity into votes. Reform UK has vaulted to the top of the opinion polls. It's a really big question, and I just am fascinated by the piece that Jacob Reed has put out this morning on the elections to Holyrood, which is the parliament in Scotland on the 7th of May. It's going to be a massive test for Farage to see whether he can do better with Reform UK than the Conservatives and the Labour Party. I mean, trying to challenge the SNP, the Scottish National Party, is potentially going to be very difficult to beat them, but it will be quite an interesting moment. So that's why we thought it would be interesting to speak to James Ludden, who is our News Desk managing editor and joins us now from Edinburgh. Very good to speak to you, James. So how has Reform actually been performing in Scotland, and what are their ambitions for this election? Farage has been very pointed in saying how important these May elections are.
Yes, it's a first genuine test, you could say, for Farage in the current cycle. Scotland, as you say, goes to the elections in May, and it's the first time he really has to put his credentials on the table. So here in Scotland, 18 months ago, his party was nowhere in the general election. But what's changed since is that Labour has kind of cratered, really, and Farage's party is tapping into that sense of malaise that people just don't think they're being listened to. And he's a very skilled operator, and that he's talking the people's language, but he's short on policies. But when it comes to emotion, it seems to be resonating.
Yeah, and for this piece, our team has been speaking to voters in the fishing port of Peterhead as well. And this is, the question of fishing, of course, was central to the Brexit debate. And Scotland overwhelmingly voted to remain in the EU. But how is Nigel Farage and his party helping to gain popularity in that area? Yeah,
Peterhead, it's an interesting case because it is the largest fishing port that this country has. And you do think that if Farage can't cut it in Peterhead, then he probably can't cut it anywhere in Scotland. It looks very much like it's running neck and neck between Reform UK and the SNP. And again, as I was saying, it's not so much an immigration kind of calling card that he's laying on people's doorsteps. It's more, again, this sense of, oh God, no one listens to us. We're stuck in northeast Scotland, and nothing's really happening. And it's a powerful cocktail for sort of disaffected people. Is he going to translate that nationally in Scotland? That's the big question. I mean, there are a couple of factors that you should remember about Farage. One, he's obviously English, and that doesn't necessarily go down particularly brilliantly with some people in Scotland. And he's very much also part of the establishment, even though he might claim that he's not. He's a privately educated guy from the home counties, and that also doesn't necessarily translate so well. But he is talking the local language. Yes, they did. It was the strongest pro-Brexit part of Scotland, and the country of Scotland was very much anti-Brexit. So you do think that if he can get it going in Peterhead, or should I say, if he can't win in Peterhead, then he's probably toast elsewhere.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? The kind of contrast there. What do you think it means then for the SNP and for Labour? Because as you say, tapping into kind of dissatisfaction, maybe cost of living issues or job issues, or those kind of bread and butter voter issues is one thing. What does it mean for the Scottish National Party and for Labour?
I'll start with Labour first. I mean, there has been some chat that the last thing that the Labour Party here needs is for Starmer to come up and help campaigning, because he doesn't resonate at all up here at the moment, and you could argue even elsewhere in the UK. And again, part of the reason that people don't necessarily go for Starmer, and therefore the Labour Party, is again that Starmer is a child of the home counties. He's from Reigate, which is hundreds of miles away, and it's that sort of again that idea that Labour isn't really a party that looks after me. The SNP, they are the people in power, and there is always this thought that SNP will give people a voice. They might not necessarily agree with their independence sort of remit, but this idea that they do actually have the voice of Scotland is quite a powerful one. Again, if you think back to 18 months or so before the last election, the general election, the SNP was the third biggest party in Parliament, and that gave them a certain voice. And it did mean that, for instance, when Sunak was on the dispatch box in the House of Commons, then the SNP had the right to reply and would stand up and make comments that was very popular with your hardcore Scot, because you're like sticking it to England a bit. So the S&P hasn't had a hugely successful time up here when it comes to managing the economy. The economy isn't doing great. But again, you could argue that's the same for maybe the north of England or central England. But they do have that reputation of having the average Scots interest very much at heart.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.